lifting our arm just up. We're standing and we're just lifting our arm up in different ways.
I forgot to come back to that.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, so the question I had about that was, going up this way, my sensation was that you had less feeling of the arm, whereas here against gravity, there was a big sensation of the arm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because as you said, the weight's out there over your base of support, whatever. So the question is, do some people do that? Because I've noticed it in kids at school. Do they do that to get more of a sense of themselves, like to get that sensation of this is my weight, this is who I am, this is, whereas here it's more in line with.
So I can't answer that question for a particular child.
No,
I can't.
Is that?
But I would say most physical education is about this. And so we get this idea that we impose on our movement.
But you do get more of a sensation of your.
It's a habit of sensation.
It's a habit of feeling.
I think it can be a habit of direction. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a habit of sensation. It's a habit of direction, but it's associated with more work.
Yeah.
Now, people who like to feel that they're doing something good and they're working hard are more likely to go in this pathway. So in my practice, if I'm working with something, most people, I ask them, how would you bring your arm out? How would you bring your arm overhead? They do this till it hurts. Then they do this, and then it's something like that.
Yeah.
But biomechanically, the most efficient way to bring your arm overhead is this. But we're not used to that pattern of sensations. We are when we're very young. This is what we do. We are when we eat. So it can be very much context dependent.
Yeah, I just wonder, because we've got some kids that are really into that. They need a lot of sensory input from the outside world. And so I just wonder if, because they do tend to.
Did you do the angels in the snow lesson? It's one of the names.
I've done angels.
Where you this?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a pathway.
Yeah.
But here you're not lifting against gravity. You're finding what's the amount of work you need to do in order to bring your arms over your head.
Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking that could also be a balance thing when kids are
Could be a balance thing, absolutely. Yep, because tightrope workers are going to use the weight of their arm in that position, in that configuration. Good point. Roll it. Yeah, flying games.
Gloria, were you talking more psychologically though? Because
a lot of kids at school that we have on air kind of cushions.
Is this a special needs school?
No, this is a regular school with special needs kids, of course.
Okay, yeah,
they're in regular schools these days. Or we have them on slopes, or we have them with their feet on unstable kind of things, or they need like Velcros underneath the edge of the table because they're after that sensory input all the time to get their position in space or to get some kind of feedback that they're just not getting when they're sitting still.
So let's say perhaps.
Okay.
As I said, it's.
I'm not convinced that it works, but
that's right. That's another question.
Current thing that they're
Did
doing.
You still want to add something?
We want to chat about this later.
Use the lesson.
You were saying how like a sense of self and
well, it's many things. It's their sense of self.
I think all that I was going to say is that like in other like somatic stuff that I've been learning about, like weight sensing is so much to do with actually getting a sense of yourself, and also all of these movements, arcing, spoking, they're all about slowly interacting with the world. So for me, there's a huge psychological element, and I was just wondering if that's what you were getting at rather than biomechanical, that's all. So
Well, it's crossing, isn't it? Okay. Any other questions about the ATM? Are you, Connor? I'm not sure if you're.
Okay.
Yeah. It's appropriate. Is she? Yeah. Okay.
Just quickly. It's quite easy to roll your legs to the side, but it's very heavy to come back, and that's where I'm finding that my neck engages really strongly.
I need more details about which variation you're talking about.
Hands under your back.
Under the back.
Legs
all
crossed.
about the. Okay, let's ask them. Sorry, let's ask them. How did you make your legs?
Come back lighter so that you don't engage your neck so much?
Missed the first part.
How do you come back?
Yeah,
so it's the reversibility. So I can go tiny bit, but once I've tipped over, I can't come back without it really being a lot of work.
Anyone discover something for themselves about that ATM? Can you chuck the box over here?
I've found if I could, there's kind of a sliding going on with my sternum.
Tell me how we've got the legs.
So exactly what she was just saying, crossed over, hand under your back, and when you're bringing your legs back, I went smaller and smaller to start with, but then I found there was a horizontal slide of my sternum and ribs, that if my sternum was sliding horizontally to the floor, I could get that moving back. Then it would take a lot of the
strain out of
my neck.
And what do you think we might be using to move the sternum relative to the spine?
The rotation through your thoracic.
Yeah, what else? Because the intercostals aren't that, don't have big cross section. They're not that strong.
Oh no, that's just the sensation I was getting.
Well, I'm not denying the movement.
Yeah.
What creates it? What would have the capacity to move the sternum in that way?
Diagonal muscles in the torso.
Yes, transverse and obliques, oblique abdominals. Both of them would be active, cooperating together in the pathway. Psoas could be engaged in it, but basically it's your core. It's the balance between the flexors and the extensors.
I had the same trouble going down because I do it so slowly that it would still be very weighty.
Yep.
And it would be like, oh God, if I actually relax any of these muscles, I'm just going to
fall.
Yeah.
So to allow a smooth, controlled movement, you need the differentiation of the thorax, which you can't have a differentiation without having the costovertebral joints that you were looking at, without having movement in them, and the movement in the axis of the spine, the rotation. Thank you.
Could you explain the role of the head being when the head is part of the pattern, and when the head is a point of differentiation?
I will say a little about that, not a lot.
Yes, within the lesson.
So, Philippa, would you like to take the legs for me? So, unknowingly, we often have ideas. Now, let me go back a step. The head is the most mobile part of the spine. We use it every day, all day, when we're upright, to orient our eyes. The environment that we're in often leads to a constraining of the turning of the whole body. Unless we consciously move ourselves, I've got a chair back here or a car seat. It may seem easier just to turn my neck because I feel, if I'm not aware that I can move in space around my axis, I feel the constraint, so I don't. I just move this. So all of this is really habitual. To do this and not move this, I have to keep my shoulders. I could be keeping my shoulders still, which means I've learned how to use the muscles of my head and neck in one relationship. So this is the stationary point, and I'm moving around that. Here, we're keeping this stationary, but we're trying to move everything else underneath. So if it goes straight to the head, it's like the cue ball, the cue stick and pokeballs, that if there's a line up, now I may have my analogies wrong here, but someone else can help me. You shoot the one ball into the end, the other end moves, the other ball end moves. Yes. So if you don't, so here we want all these to move. And there is no reason for the head to move very much if all of that is moving. But there are other ATMs, There are other ATMs when we've done things with the head and the arms and we've explored this, which is all about finding, in a way, balance and what is possible in specific relationships.
So at the beginning, when we were taking arms over our head and then rolling,
then the head is free to move.
the head is free to move.
Yes,
But
it was
when-
unconstrained.
yeah, okay.
And the more you roll, the more the chest is
Yeah.
going to turn, and that's going to take the vertebral column with it,
Yes.
and the head is going to roll.
So in that place, you're really wanting to look at the relationship of how the head moves as you're taking you're extending your arms.
Then what I did was responded to what was happening in the room.
And so, okay.
Some people kept their head there and were trying to do this.
Okay.
That's one possibility.
Yes.
Some people were letting their head roll that way. That's the more biomechanically congruent thing to happen. I don't think anyone was, oh no, there was. Somebody was doing this.
Yeah. And
Then I suggested, that's right, then I said, follow with your eyes, because following with your eyes is likely to use the thoracic extensors. We can do it in different ways. I could use my lower back, or I could use my whole spine.
Yes. So then so that is a sequencing of the pattern. But then when you have the head still, it's about differentiating the movement in the scapular. And
Yeah, the whole lesson is about, you could say, is about finding possibilities through highlighting with constraints or directions of movement what is possible. And for each person, what's possible, what's a constraint, and what's an auxiliary movement varies a little bit.
And part of what you're doing is looking at what is happening and responding. The movement of the head is a response to what people are doing.
Yes.
Okay.
And in this lesson, in this particular lesson, well, actually, it's a combination of lessons. You want to know, what difference does it make if the head's quiet? So some people cannot keep their head quiet. And it's difficult. How do you sense whether you're working unnecessarily? And it's particularly hard to access in our head and neck.
It was very interesting to do.
Yeah.
I had, sorry. I was thinking in the person that there are many persons with many injuries in that part. For me, it wasn't difficult to put the hand in these positions, but I was wondering how can you involve that people are in pain in this part.
So pain, if people had shoulder pain, I would get them to imagine the lesson. Angela came up with a suggestion, we came up with a suggestion, an option, which I did say out loud, but you may not have heard it. Okay? So the idea is to explore in a non-visual, non-familiar configuration, that so we know the intention. But if you had pain in the arm, in the shoulder, doing that, you could go here, or here, or even there. Yes? That the only difficulty about turning your palm up is you're taking it with the palm turned up. See if you can see this.
Yeah, but if you can't do it,
Let's, if you know that, yes, you can do it whichever approximation brings it closer. But I would say if I saw somebody doing it with the palm up, I would look for another option. So when we're standing, do we stand like this? No. Now to put my hand behind my back, palm up, requires something that someone else's configuration may find easy. I certainly don't. So the intention is that with the turning downward, just I'm hearing you. I'm coming back.
I'm following.
Yeah.
I'm following. I'm just saying it was. Yeah,
So
hard.
when you're, look what happens, see if you can see what happens when I turn my palm that away. It's taking my shoulder blade towards my spine.
Yeah, I knew.
Yeah,
I
good.
know.
Then you can do whatever you like. You adjust it for whatever you need. Think? Yes. Yes. The shoulder girdle. Again, I spoke to that. So when you do the ATM again, you might hear it because I spoke about it. Normally, we move the arms on the torso. We move out the distal part of ourselves in space. Here, fixing the arm and moving the proximal, the proximal on the distal part. Yeah. Helen. Do you want to show us what you found?
No, I don't want to go on with that one.
No, okay. Okay.
Can you demonstrate
Mhm.
how you move your shoulder, your elbow, headwards and footwards,
Mhm.
without and keep the shoulder still?
I didn't.
The shoulder.
You
and
can't keep the
hand.
shoulder still.
But I thought that's what you said.
No.
I thought I heard that.
No.
Shoulder passive, just move the elbow.
No.
Well, yeah, passive
Yeah.
is different.
And I said head passive. I would probably put a bet on it. I didn't, but it's irrelevant. It's what we hear or what we associate with instructions. Hand still. Yeah. And I said also, somebody asked about the hand, and I said, yeah, it could slide or creep on the floor a little bit. Yeah. And when something's difficult for us, or any one of us, whatever it is that we find difficult, we'll tend to get a blind spot. We tend to have Moshe called it scotoma. You know, it's a bit of a part of us that we have more difficulty seeing, more difficulty hearing something, and will hear what we can understand through our experience. And this is not an easy lesson. I have changed. So this is a sequence in Amherst, and I've given you a much slower lead-in than Moshe actually does. And depending on the time, we're going to do a little bit more before lunch. Again, I'm adapting it for you, but it gets more challenging. So as it gets more challenging, you will need to take care of yourself in whatever way you need to take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. Anna. Oh no, we won't be doing it.
When we had the legs straight,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a whole dreamy blur, that whole thing to me. It's obviously blind spots. But when no, it's because when you said like keep the neck straight, I was like, okay,
Didn't
My
say
neck was
keep the
getting-
neck
not
straight.
No, sorry, still as possible in that particular.
Well, I
position.
asked people to exaggerate it.
Oh.
So I asked people to exaggerate, press their head, keep it fixed.
I just left mine fixed for a while, and then I got a sore neck. But anyway,
That's what we do.
but with the legs straight,
Mhm.
I don't quite get that whole movement. I couldn't figure out where to initiate.
I'm still
it
not
from.
clear which movement you do.
The
What,
last
the end
kind of
one,
when we had
the rolling, arms over the head.
up there. Yeah, and
Your legs can be involved. So who found that easy?
some
I'm
people
just
did big movements.
Yeah, let's have a look at Philip. Want to come here?
Let's see what it looks like. That's good.
So let's start with the knees bent. And let's do it that way. And turn your palms away from you. Yep. And then just begin the movement first of lengthening your arms to one side. That's enough? Yep. So some people get the idea that the arms need to stick on the floor. And when you're teaching an ATM, you're going to address a relationship and try and get the majority of the room, depending on the size, number of participants in the room, following. But if there's one person that doesn't get it, how long do you keep persisting? So this is important, the rolling and the lifting of the shoulder, because as this shoulder lifts, Philippa is able to engage and use more of her extensors through her spine. She's still using her feet a little bit.
So they're
Okay.
flexing. They're flexing.
And now lengthen. And yet now. But now, and go do half as much, Philippa. Come back through your back. Yeah, half as much. Let your hands soften in the middle. That's right. Yeah. Yep. You could even do less.
So there's a lot of flexion going on in the back and
Extension. Well, that's how she's doing it. Other people will do it differently. But that's one of the key strategies. Pardon? Banana. Kind of. Yeah. Thank you. She looks like she's enjoying it. Yeah. Now, I want you to do something different because this is important for the next part of the lesson. So, have you heard me talking about standing leg? What a standing leg is. Still a bit of a scotoma for many, not less than the beginning. Okay, so what characteristics are there of a standing leg? So I'm standing now, or standing any part of ourselves. So I'm standing. What direction, what relationship to the floor are my legs? Perpendicular. So my weight can go down through the bones. So, I could, if I do this, if it's not vertical, I'm going to fall, I'm going to lose my balance. So what do you remember I've talked about when you bend your knees, are your legs standing? Do you remember what we've talked about? We've explored it a little bit. Yeah, we explored the distance between the feet, the direction of the feet, the distance between the knees. Yep, distance feet, yes, this way. Mm-hmm. They're balanced, they don't feel they fall in and out. So in order to not be going inwards and outwards or doing too much work, what do we need them? They need to be in a plane. So a plane that passes through each of the joints. So this is what I want. It could be your legs out there, and it's still in a plane. You could be your foot is here, and your leg is still in a plane. But that's one component, because as soon as the knee, so now the foot and the hip are in line, but the knee's not in the same plane. So if there were no muscles attached, the leg would fall out. Yes. And so that you've got to do some work to hold the leg up if you keep the leg there. Oh, yes, sorry, but it's not perpendicular. Thank you for being, yep. So the other thing is we want the weight to be able to go down through the lower leg. So it really is a standing leg. So where is it, and it's not always possible because of a knee injury or the musculature and tissues aren't free enough to get into this vertical position, but you want to be as close to that as possible. Now, the Moshe said, on a standing leg, you can sit on it and you won't break the leg. Okay? So, I'm going to invite you to get into threes and have a look at how does it feel. So two people are going to help guide a person to have their legs standing. If you don't feel comfortable sitting on the leg, that's fine. But you could put your hands on either side of their knee and see, do you feel like it's solid? Okay, so here, if I lean, it's not solid. The ankle's going to collapse. They are still on the plane, but it's going to collapse. Okay? Yes. Not physically, words. But not telling them where it is, use words. So you're helping them to feel different positions. Now, a key thing is, maybe we'll just add this little aspect to it. What difference is it going to make to the feeling of weight of the pelvis if the legs are standing as opposed to that, the feet being further away? So you're going to, the two of you, two people are going to help guide the person on the floor to explore feet in different positions and what difference it makes to the lifting of their pelvis. So you're using those parameters, criteria to find it. Tiny bit. It's not that you're lifting as high as you can. Yep. Okay. So one person will lie on the floor, the other two, and stand their feet. The other two are going to observe. Then you're going to ask them to lift their pelvis just as their feet are. Just once or twice. Guide them to change their feet into some other relationships. Each place, ask them to lift their pelvis a couple of times and see what happens. And then if you feel like they get close to a standing or even not, you can give them a sense of what it feels like to press down towards their foot. So I'm not trying to push towards the hip necessarily. It's downwards, and if their leg is in a balanced position, standing position, you feel they will feel the pressure on their foot and probably in their hip joint as well, but it won't feel uncomfortable. Okay? In threes.